We're kicking things off with a showdown in the SEC West. Texas A&M and Arkansas in a top 25 matchup in AT&T Stadium. Last season, the Hawgs beat the Aggies for the first time in a decade, bumping them out of the top 10 and derailing their hopes of an SEC championship. Now, A&M looking to return the favor. Two of our team side experts are here to help us break down this game. Trey Biddy of hogsports.com and Brian Peroni of Gig'em247.com. And guys, this may not be the prettiest game. Arkansas's pass defense ranks dead last in the country, which would be good news for the Aggies if they could get their offense going. A&M still trying to find some rhythm after making the QB switch to Max Johnson. So how do you guys see this playing out, Brian?
So Texas A&M's offense did look better against Miami than against Appalachian State, but still was not great. You have Max Johnson, who has starting experience in the SEC at OSU last year. He took over, but still only threw for less than 150 yards. So he's really got to get going. You know, he's going against a secondary that, like you said, is not exactly the best, but it's still an unproven offense. And then you have to get Devon Achane going at running back. He had almost 100 yards last week, but the running game has still been lacking so far. So if A&M is not able to move the ball better than they did against Miami, it could be a long game for them.
This is not a case where the irresistible force meets the immovable object with these two sides of the ball. I mean, Arkansas, as you mentioned, dead last in the country with 352 passing yards per game surrendered. Texas A&M only 208 yards, 99th in the country. So I look for Arkansas to mix some things up in the secondary. They've had a few injury issues. We'll get to that, but mix some things up in the secondary. And the silver bullet for Arkansas could be sacks, because that's part of pass defense that's not really mentioned. Arkansas leads the nation with 17 sacks and leads by 3. Drew Sanders leads the SEC with 5 sacks. The top 3 sack guys in the conference are actually all from Arkansas. It took Arkansas till week 11 last year to get 17 sacks. So if they can disrupt Max Johnson, who might be, not that he's a bad athlete, but might be the least athletic of the quarterbacks that Arkansas has faced, then maybe they can force some big plays, some interceptions and things of that nature.
Yeah, always helps if you can get pressure to the quarterback, but relief is coming for the Hogs secondary. Miles Slusher expected to return from injury this week. On the Aggie side, 2 freshman wide receivers and 2 freshman defensive backs will be back on the field after a 1-game suspension. Trey, we'll start with you. With these rosters returning to almost full strength, how does that impact the game plan?
Yeah, not the only reason that Arkansas has given up so many passing yards, but it's been a big impact. I mean, they've been without Miles Slusher, who was lost in the first game. Jalen Catalon is a preseason All-American who was lost in the first game at safety. And then Ladarius Bishop, who started all last year at cornerback, has been out. So that's probably impacted them quite a bit. Now, they are going to get Miles Slusher. I'm not sure on Ladarius Bishop. Jalen Catalon's out for the season, but they're getting Miles Slusher back, probably move him from nickel to middle safety, which is where he played last year as part of that shakeup in the defensive secondary that we're expecting to see. Jashad Stewart has been out, one of their defensive ends, and also Dominic Johnson, who led them with 7 rushing touchdowns, took over the starting job at running back last year. A nice big back for them, and from the state of Texas, should also be back for this one. So they get a little bit healthier, but not completely healthy for this one.
So Texas A&M had the #1 signing class of all time, the highest ranked of all time this past year. So the incoming freshmen, or the true freshmen, are incredibly valuable to the team. And there were 4 that were missing last week. You had Evan Stewart and Chris Marshall at wide receiver, and Denver Harris and Smoke Bowie at cornerback, and it was definitely noticeable. Evan Stewart is a starter. Denver Harris was on the road to starting, possibly a cornerback. So with those guys back, it'll be good for depth. A&M also had 2 players that were ejected for targeting in the first half last week in the secondary, in Damani Richardson and Brian George. So getting those guys back for the entire game will be big for a secondary that was definitely depleted, and you could tell that they needed some bodies out there against Miami.
Okay, looking at the strengths of these teams, maybe A&M's defense needs to get off the field, but they do show up when it matters. And Arkansas, of course, has the run game, and it all starts with KJ Jefferson at the helm. What do you guys think is the deciding factor in this game, Brian?
So A&M cannot let Arkansas just have the ball and run it at them and have 15-play drives like they allowed with Appalachian State and Miami. They had 82 defensive plays 2 weeks ago, and they had 77 against Miami. They cannot do that against the Razorbacks, or the Arkansas will get in the end zone. Miami was not able to do that, and A&M got sort of lucky with that as they were outgained a ton. So the defense really needs to step up, and they could do so in the middle, as they likely will have McKinley Jackson back at defensive tackle in the rotation. He's a former national top 50 recruit that had a great freshman year 2 years ago. So he could help A&M get off the field, and the linebackers need to step up as well, because it'll be a long game for the defense if they can't.
Yeah, Arkansas ranks 10th nationally in rushing yards, 243.7 yards per game. Texas A&M is giving up a lot of rushing yards, one of the worst rushing defenses in the country, 154, ranked 83rd nationally. I thought Miami did have some success running the ball against them, just couldn't put it in the end zone, as Brian mentioned. It all starts with Rocket Sanders for Arkansas, leading the SEC with 143 rushing yards per game, 3rd nationally. He's a big back, 6'1", 227 pounds. And also KJ Jefferson is a really strong runner from the quarterback spot, actually led Arkansas in rushing last year. He's a big guy at 6'3", 242. And then I mentioned earlier Dominic Johnson coming back, a Texas guy, 6'1", 247 pounds, who has not played this year since injuring his knee in the Outback Bowl, but that could be another guy. And we've seen when Arkansas can have success running the ball, which they've had, they can also be extremely efficient in the passing game. KJ Jefferson's throwing the long ball really well, especially did last week. So if Arkansas can run the ball, that could be real trouble for Texas A&M, and I would expect them to be able to do that.
All right, it's going to be a good one. Thanks, guys, for your insight. And for more coverage on this game, check out gig'em247.com and hogsports.com. And stick around for later in the show, because Alan Bell from Sportsline will be picking this game and others.